Third reading for this morning is taken from John 6, verses 1 through 21. Jesus went to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, also called the Sea of Tiberias. A large crowd kept following him because they saw the signs that he was doing for the sick. Jesus went up the mountain and sat down there with his disciples. Now the Passover, the festival of the Jews, was near. When he looked up and saw a large crowd coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread for these people to eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 6 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each of them to get a little. One of the disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they among so many people?" Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." Now there was a great deal of grass in the place, so they sat down, about 5,000 in all. Then Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. When they were satisfied, he told his disciples, "Gather up the fragments left over so that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up, and from the fragments of the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten, they filled 12 baskets. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they began to say, "This is indeed the prophet who is to come into the world." When Jesus realized that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain by himself. When evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, got into a boat, and started across the sea to Capernaum. Now it was dark, and Jesus had not come to them. The sea became rough because a strong wind was blowing. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and coming near the boat, and they were terrified. But he said to them, "It is I, do not be afraid." Then they wanted to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the land toward which they were going. Hear what the Spirit is saying to God's people. Thanks be to God. call good morning. Usually I say that beforehand. I'm going to say it now. This morning, our reflection comes from Reverend Charles Hoffacker, who lives in Greenbelt, Maryland. And he is the author of A Matter of Life and Death, Preaching at Funerals. Many of his sermons appear on this Sermons of the Week, sermonwriter.com. We see it from time to time. Someone performs brave deeds, enjoys great advantages, reaches a lofty position of prominence. Defeat seems impossible, and then comes stumbling, falling headlong, breaking into pieces on the rocks due to the wrong choices. The rest of the story plays out of the consequences of this disaster. Not only one person, but many others are also defeated, and the nation is left limping. We see it from time to time as fall from tremendous heights. Now consider David. What has the Lord given him? Victory over Goliath, protection against Saul, a royal daughter in marriage, Israel, Judah, Jerusalem. David rescues allies, defeats enemies, brings God's ark home to Jerusalem with abundant rejoicing. But then one spring day, with the army out in the field risking their lives, David rises from a long nap in his comfortable palace and everything starts to unravel. He catches sight of a very beautiful woman over at the house next door and ends up sleeping with her. Although a capital crime under the law, this adultery represents no threat to the king. Only a few loyal servants know about this incident, and they are discreet. Case closed. Many weeks pass, and David receives a message from a woman whose name is Bathsheba. I am with child, is what she tells him. She's pregnant, and David is the father. The woman's husband, a soldier from a prominent family, has been put out in the field so long, there's no way the child is his. Here, David moves from crime to cover-up. He calls Uriah, the woman's husband, back from the battlefield. If he spends a night with her, he and everyone else will assume that the baby is his. But the plot does not work. He does not sleep with his wife, Bathsheba, believing that to do so would betray his buddies out in the trenches. Frustrated, David takes the cover-up to the point of calculated murder. He sends Uriah back to the front with a sealed message to his commander Joab. This message results in Uriah dying in battle, betrayed by his commander and his king. David is one of the most prominent figures in the entire Bible. In the story of Bathsheba and Uriah, what stands out above all is David as a taker. He takes and takes again, to the great detriment of many people. So today we hear of adultery and cover-up and the betrayal to death of an innocent man. David hurdles from grace, and he appears as a taker and nothing more. We also hear a story of a hungry crowd out in the country. Jesus feeds them all with an abundance of fish, an abundance of bread. His partner in showing concern is a boy willing to give up his lunch for others. This boy and Jesus are a pair of givers. Everybody's fed with a startling supply of leftovers for later. There's no crime, no cover-up here, but a conspiracy to give rather than take, launched by a pair of generous people. And it works. Nobody crashes. These two stories are as obvious as billboards. Each one of us, on many occasions, faces a choice. We could be takers, or we could be givers. Like David, we can enter into crime and cover up. But like Jesus and that anonymous boy, we can give to people who otherwise would suffer. So here's something that may help us in our decision between taking, and giving. Today's gospel includes echoes of the Exodus account that we need to recognize, for they tell us, in case we need a reminder, where the living God is to be found between those who take and those who give. This gospel includes two stories. First, Jesus feeds the 5,000, showing compassion to the hungry and building on the generosity of a boy who gave up his lunch. Second, Jesus walks on water to the disciples' boat, and immediately the boat reaches land, despite the strong wind that is blowing. And this giving is the way of life that God blesses. This is the spiritual practice to which we are called. As Christians, we know that God gives, we know that Christ gives, and we recognize as well that we also can be givers. We can even summon back the takers from the way of death and offer to them the gift of life that God ardently intends forever. Amen.